AJH hit me up from Round Rock, Texas. In this current model of NIL rules, is it more important to recruit high school or focus on the transfer portal, both getting and keeping for rosters? It's always more important to focus on recruiting. It doesn't mean focus 100% on it. I think we've answered this question a variety of ways, but it's something a lot of athletic departments are asking themselves. I say that because basketball is the same way as football right now. But in football, for example, it's easy, and I think most coaches would look you in the eye and say, oh, we want to build through recruiting. And they do. They're not lying about that. But here's the thing. It's easy to say that when you're taking a job. It's easy to say that on day one. What happens when you're 2 years in and you're having to make some course corrections, because your initial plan just didn't work out, and you had to overhaul half of your staff, and you're having to alter some recruiting models because maybe you hired a coordinator that's going to run a different kind of offense, so now you're recruiting for that offense instead of the one you originally thought you were going to run. Well, that's kind of like hitting the reset button. It's kind of like what Lincoln Riley's doing on defense right now. It doesn't matter that he's a few years in. They're kind of hitting the reset button on the program. Well, the thing is, the public's not in line with that. Like, USC fans aren't looking at Lincoln Riley and say, oh, you're 3 years in now. Oh, we're more than happy to just pretend like this is year one for you. So you claimed that you wanted to recruit and build your roster that way, but what if it doesn't look like you have time to do it? Well, then that's when you start having to make some quick decisions, and you have to go about it via the portal. And the problem there is obvious. You don't build a team with parts. Like you build a team with individuals, true enough, but man, they've got to have a lot of gelling that goes on. It's the metaphor that I've started to use a lot on the show because I had a head coach explain it to me this way, and it was really, really good. And I love metaphors. He said, if you've ever worked construction, which I have, you go to the job site in the morning, they drop off the pallets of lumber and the pallets of bricks, but no one looks at that stuff and says, there's your house. You look at it and say, well, there are the materials to build the house, but there's a lot of hammering and nailing. There's a lot of mortar that has to go between the bricks. There's a lot of adhesive. There's a lot that has to go into putting those materials together in the proper form to build a house. It's the same way with individual football players versus forming a team. So it's hard enough when you recruit them all. But what if you recruit them all, and then you're going and plucking guys out of the portal? It can work. Florida State's done it a couple of times. Bama's best receiver a couple of years ago when they made a run was Jamison Williams. He came out of the portal. So it can be done. But is that the way that coaches would prefer to go about doing it? Absolutely not. And I think Michigan last year was a really good example of what happens when you go about it the classical way. I just wonder, moving forward, how many more examples, a la Michigan 2023, do we have? How many more teams do you look at and say, wow, look at those guys. I remember when they came in together and they took their lumps as freshmen and then they made a big jump as sophomores and they almost got there as juniors, and voila, there they are with the maize and blue confetti raining down around them as seniors. Well, that's the way the movie would make college football look. That is not the way college football classically looks anymore, or in a modern way looks anymore, I guess. So, yeah, you want to do it via recruiting. And I think ultimately the ones who master that enough will have dividends paid for them, but no one is going to strictly do it via recruiting anymore. And if you try that, you're going to put yourself maybe at a competitive disadvantage. And I think that's one of the big talking points around a Clemson versus a Miami or Florida State right now, in that those programs, the latter two, Florida State and Miami, they've looked at the portal, and I'm not necessarily sure those coaches are crazy about it, but they've said, we're rolling up our sleeves and diving into that thing. If it's there, we're going after it. And Dabo has not done that. He's just not. So that's a philosophy. That's all that is. Nothing more, nothing less.